Hello, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we are going to discuss the important issues appearing in the Hindu newspaper dated 31st January 2019. The news to be discussed has been presented on the screen, and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let's start our today's discussion. The first news appears on page number 1 and also appears as a continuation on page number 10. Ministries flouting norms, says Election Commission. Follow protocols to clear decisions. Now, in this particular news, the Union Ministries had sought approval of the Election Commission for announcing certain decisions after the application of Model Code of Conduct. However, the Election Commission has expressed its disapproval for such a request. After receiving such request from Union Ministries, the Election Commission has dispatched a letter to the Cabinet Secretary and said that such request made to the Election Commission for granting of approval of certain decisions after applicability of Model Code of Conduct shall be returned without any due consideration. So in this matter, the Election Commission has taken a serious note of the issue and has urged the Cabinet Secretary to ask its officers to ensure strict compliance of due process of law. So, taking note of the complaint of the Election Commission, the Cabinet Secretary has asked secretaries of Union Ministries to follow strict compliance of law and procedure while communicating with the Election Commission as well as other constitutional bodies. Now, this topic in your prelims examination gets covered under Indian Polity and Governance, and in your mains under GS Paper 2 as well as GS Paper 4. Under GS Paper 4, it gets covered under Concept of Public Service, Codes of Ethics, and Codes of Conduct. So, after understanding the basics of this news, let us also understand certain key facts with respect to Model Code of Conduct. Now, Model Code of Conduct is a set of guidelines issued by the Election Commission to regulate political parties and candidates prior to elections, and thereby to ensure conduct of free and fair elections in India. And conduct of free and fair elections in India is the constitutional duty of Election Commission under Article 324 of the Indian Constitution. Article 324 talks about superintendence, direction, and control of elections to be vested in the Election Commission. So basically, the Model Code of Conduct is a set of norms which has been evolved with the consensus of political parties who have consented to abide by these principles embodied under the Model Code of Conduct. Now, another important aspect with respect to MCC is that Model Code of Conduct is enforced from the date of announcement of election schedule by the Election Commission. With respect to applicability of the Model Code of Conduct, during general elections to the House of People, that is Lok Sabha, the code is applicable throughout the country. During elections to the Legislative Assembly, the code is applicable in the entire state. And during the bypolls, the code is applicable in the entire district or districts in which the constituency falls. Now, another important aspect is that the ministers shall not combine their official visit with the electioneering work. So basically, when the Model Code of Conduct is in operation, only official visits are allowed, and such official visits cannot be used for the purpose of election. And thereby, the ministers shall not make use of official machinery or even personnel during the election work. Further, when the Model Code of Conduct is applicable, transfer of officers who are directly or indirectly connected with the conduct of elections shall not take place, and any transfer or posting of an officer shall only be considered necessary on prior approval of the Election Commission. So, after understanding the Model Code of Conduct, the question which arises in the mind is that is Model Code of Conduct legally binding? No, Model Code of Conduct in itself is not legally binding. However, some provisions of the MCC gets enforced through different provisions of the law like Indian Penal Code, CRPC, and Representation of People Act 1951. Moreover, in 2013, a standing committee on personnel, public grievance, law and justice has recommended to make Model Code of Conduct legally binding. Further, in a report on electoral reforms, the committee had observed that most provisions of Model Code of Conduct are already applicable through the Indian Penal Code, Criminal Procedure Code, and Representation of People Act 1951. So on this note, the Standing Committee has recommended to make Model Code of Conduct a part of Representation of People Act 1951. Thus, we can say that free and fair elections forms the bedrock of democracy and envisages a level playing field for the contestants. And it also provides equal opportunities for all political parties to present their policies and programs to their voters. Thus, in this backdrop, the Model Code of Conduct gains significance as it provides a level playing field to all political parties and ensures a free and fair elections. Thus, this particular news becomes extremely important from our UPSC perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. Now, the next news on gold rush appears as an editorial on page number 8. It says, tightening monetary policies in the West and supply factors led to the spurt in gold prices. So, this editorial highlights that the world economy has been witnessing a spike in the price of gold or an increase in the price of gold. And this increase in the price of gold can also be seen in India. As editorial highlights that the price of the gold in the Indian market has reached its highest level, hitting 33,800 mark. However, this editorial highlights that this rapid increase in the value of gold has led to a sharp depreciation in the value of currencies of the emerging market with respect to rising gold prices. Now, this increase in the price of gold can be attributed to mainly increase in demand and also at the same time a decrease in supply. So, this editorial highlights that with an increasing price of gold in the world economy, along with a sharp decline in the value of currency in emerging markets, points to a likely slowdown in the global economy. Now, this editorial on gold rush forms a part of economy in your prelims examination, and in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 3 under Indian economy and various issues. Now, increase in price in gold puts pressure on developing countries as it reduces their purchasing power of gold. Now, post 2008 financial crisis, the central banks of the developed economies were following expansionary monetary policies in order to increase money supply in the market, and thereby they reduce their rate of interest. However, now the central banks have now put an end to such unconventional policies and are now pursuing contractionary monetary policy, and thereby they have increased the rate of interest in order to reduce money supply in the economy. For example, the United States Federal Reserve has been increasing the policy rates, and this has led to outflow of capital from the developing economy, as this higher rate of interest act as an incentive for the investors to earn more profits in the developed world. Thus, this outflow of capital from developing economies to the developed economies has led to a sharp depreciation in the value of their currencies vis-a-vis dollars. Further, US China trade war, volatility in the global stock markets, and slowdown in the Chinese economy have further fueled speculations that the world economy is probably heading towards another financial crisis. And because of all these things happening in the backdrop, investors seeking financial safety have now returned to gold. And because of these financial uncertainties, many central banks have been trying to hoard gold in order to restore the confidence in their currencies. Now, fall in prices of gold in around 2012 led to less gold extraction by the gold mining companies. And because of the less extraction of gold, supply of gold in the market has reduced and has not been able to keep pace with the growing demand, thereby leading to an further increase in prices. So, this editorial mentions that in order to check the increase in prices of the gold, central banks around the world would be required to follow expansionary policy. However, such steps has its own risk with respect to an increasing liquidity in the market. So, this is an important editorial which highlights a correlation between increase in price of gold as well as the pressure which it puts on the currencies in the developing economies. Further, this editorial also mentions about a probable financial crisis because of US China trade war, volatility in global stock markets, as well as recent slowdown in the Chinese economy. So, in all these notes, this editorial must be read from a mains perspective. Now, this particular question was asked in the year 2015 in your GS paper 3. The question was, craze for gold in Indians has led to surge in import of gold in recent years and put pressure on balance of payments and external value of rupee. In view of this, examine the merits of gold monetization scheme. So we understand that fluctuations in the price of gold and its impact on the Indian economy, specifically the currency, becomes extremely important from our examination perspective. Hence, this editorial must be read from a mains perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 13. It says, DIPP rechristened to include internal trade gets 4 new sets of responsibilities. Now, DIPP, that is Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, has been renamed as Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Now, this newly created department will have four additional responsibilities apart from the one which DIP used to have. In your prelims examination, this topic forms a part of your Indian economy, and in your mains, it gets covered under GS paper 3. The four additional responsibilities are: first, promotion of internal trade; second, welfare of traders and their employees; third, facilitating ease of doing business; and fourth, to encourage startups. Now, this matter related to internal trade was earlier a part of Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. So, apart from these four additional responsibilities, the other responsibilities of DIPP were with respect to General Industrial Policy, Administration of Industries Development and Regulation Act 1951, Industrial Management, Productivity in Industries, and matters relating to e-commerce. So basically, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry has been renamed as Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Now, this particular question was asked in the prelims of 2017. Let's go through this question. It says, with reference to the National Intellectual Property Rights Policy, consider the following statements. It reiterates India's commitment to the Doha Development Agenda and the TRIPS Agreement. Second, Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion is the nodal agency for regulating intellectual property rights in India. In this, the correct answer is C, that is, both 1 and 2 are correct. On this note, let us understand certain basic facts with respect to National Intellectual Property Rights Policy. The objective of National Intellectual Property Rights Policy is to stimulate a dynamic, vibrant, and balanced intellectual property rights system in India in order to foster creativity and innovation, as creativity and innovation will further help in promoting entrepreneurship, and this will further enhance socio-economic and cultural development of the country. It also focuses on enhancing access to healthcare, food security, and environmental protection, among other sectors of vital social, economic, and technological importance. Now, this policy has laid down 7 objectives. Let's see those 7 objectives of National Intellectual Property Rights Policy. First, it talks about IPR awareness on outreach and promotion. Second, on generation of IPRs to stimulate the generation of intellectual property rights in India. Third, it aims to have a strong and effective laws with respect to intellectual property laws in India. And the aim of such law is to balance the interest of rights owners as well as larger public interest. Further, to modernize and strengthen service-oriented IPR administration in India. Fifth, to get value for intellectual property rights through commercialization of such IPRs. Sixth, enforcement and adjudication, where the policy aims to strengthen the enforcement and adjudicatory mechanism for combating IPR infringements. So the policy aims to provide a proper enforcement and adjudicatory environment. And seventh, it aims to develop a human capital development to strengthen and expand human resources, institutions, and capabilities for teaching, training, research, and even skill building in the field of intellectual property rights. So these are the 7 main objectives of the national IPR policy in India. Thus, this particular news, where DIPP has been renamed as Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, must be remembered from a prelims point of view. And another important aspect to be remembered is that internal trade was earlier part of Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, which has now been transferred as additional responsibility of the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. Thus, with this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next article appears on page number 9. It says, Getting Back on Track. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to India helped further strengthen bilateral ties between India and South Africa. Now, this topic forms a part of GS Paper 2 under International Relations, specifically with respect to bilateral relations. President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa was on his first state visit to India and was also the chief guest at India's 70th Republic Day parade held on 26 January 2019. A 3-year strategic program of cooperation was signed between India and South Africa to further enhance our strategic partnership. So, in this news analysis, let us understand further about this strategic program signed between India and South Africa. To begin with, India and South Africa had already signed a strategic partnership agreement which was named Redford Declaration in the year 1997. This Redford Declaration was further reaffirmed with more modifications in the Shwani Declaration of 2006. So, the Strategic Program of Cooperation 2019 has emphasized the need to further deepen the relations in political, economic, defense, scientific, consular, and even socio cultural spheres between India and South Africa. Moving further, India and South Africa, through this strategic program of cooperation, has further deepened their security cooperation. And in this aspect, both India and South Africa intends to keep their sea lanes secure against illegal actors. So by signing this strategic program for cooperation, both India and South Africa has ensured unhindered passage for trade and continued prosperity of the entire Indian Ocean region. Further, both India and South Africa have also recognized the importance of increased bilateral naval cooperation and closer synergy within the context of Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. The Indian Ocean Naval Symposium is a voluntary initiative that seeks to increase maritime cooperation among navies of the littoral states of the Indian Ocean region. And this initiative helps in providing an open and inclusive forum for discussions of regionally relevant maritime issues. Further, IONS also endeavors to generate flow of information between different naval professionals, and such flow of information helps in coming to a common understanding of the issues surrounding the Indian Ocean region. So it is in this aspect that the South African National Defence Force will participate in the first multinational India Africa field training exercise, that is IAFTX, in March 2019 at Pune. So this becomes a very important information for your upcoming prelims examination, since this particular exercise will take place in Pune in March 2019. Further, India and South Africa also agree on the early agreement and adoption of United Nations Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, as well as the implementation of UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy in a balanced and integrated manner. So these are some of the security cooperation sought by India and South Africa. Now on economic front, both India and South Africa have agreed to enhance their bilateral investments between the two countries. And on this note, they have signed a memorandum of understanding on Invest South Africa and Invest India, under which both countries have agreed to cooperate and share best practices with respect to technology and expertise in ease of doing business reform program. Further, both countries have also agreed to cooperate in the fields of SMEs, that is small and medium enterprises, as SME plays a vital role in job creation and also creating trade and investment opportunities in the market. And on this note, South Africa has agreed to simplify and reform its business visa regime. Further, India and South Africa has also agreed to cooperate or enhance cooperation in the fields of blue economy. And both countries have agreed to cooperate in multilateral forums on the blue economy, including framework of Indian Ocean Rim Association. Now, oceans economy refers to a sustainable economy for marine environment, related biodiversity, ecosystems, species and genetic resources, including marine living organisms and natural resources in the seabed. So, both India and South Africa have agreed to enhance their cooperation in the fields of ocean economy. Further, both countries have agreed to strengthen cooperation in the area of mining and deep mining, and specifically with respect to the diamond sector. Further, both countries have agreed to strengthen their cooperation in the field of agriculture and fisheries so as to increase crop and animal production, food security, to promote aquaculture and also aquatic product processing. So, these are some of the areas in which both India and South Africa have agreed for economic cooperation. On global convergences, both India and South Africa are committed to cooperate in all relevant multilateral forums through groupings of G20, BRICS, IPSA, BASIC, NAM, WTO, and the Commonwealth, and have also agreed to strengthen the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Both countries have agreed to reaffirm their commitment to enhance their voice and representation of emerging and developing economies in the decision making bodies of multilateral institutions. Another important aspect is that both India and South Africa have supported each other for a permanent seat in an expanded United Nations Security Council, as it will make the United Nations Security Council more representative and equitable. Thus, these are some of the areas on which both India and South Africa have agreed to enhance their cooperation. this particular article shall be read from a mains perspective, specifically with respect to enhancing bilateral relation between India and South Africa by signing 3-year strategic program of cooperation 2019 to 2021. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next news appears on page number 3. It says Biopolymer research to focus on new products. In this particular news, state of Rajasthan is promoting research in the biopolymer sector with an emphasis on fabrication of new products as well as for generation of more employment opportunities. And this initiative will also be linked to the handicraft industry. Now, polymer is a generic term used to describe a very long molecule chain consisting of structural units and repeating units connected by covalent bonds. Now, biopolymer is a polymer that is developed from living beings. Now, biopolymers are biodegradable chemical compound that is regarded as the most organic compound in the ecosphere. So basically, the word biopolymer itself indicates that it is a biodegradable polymer. Now, some examples of biopolymer are proteins, carbohydrates, DNA, RNA, lipids, nucleic acids, and peptides. Now, these biopolymers play an essential role in nature. They are extremely useful in performing functions like storage of energy, cellular construction, and even transmittance of genetic information. Further, these biopolymers are carbon neutral and hence can always be renewed. Now, carbon neutral refers to achieving net zero carbon emission by balancing carbon dioxide released in the atmosphere and carbon dioxide sequestered from the atmosphere or absorbed from the atmosphere, thereby providing a net balance of achieving zero carbon emission. So, these biopolymers are carbon neutral, and this becomes an extremely important point from your prelims perspective. In this news analysis, these informations on biopolymer become extremely important from your prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to our next news analysis. The next article appears on page number 8. It reads, Stormy weather awaits India in 2019. The country faces a difficult external as well as internal situation. It needs to show more dexterity on the diplomatic front. Now, this article has been written by M.K. Narayanan, who was a former national security advisor. So, in this article, he highlights the external as well as internal situations which the Indian government needs to foresee in the year 2019. So, on this note, let's go through the points highlighted by the author in this particular article. The external situations highlighted in this article by the author gets covered under international relations under GS paper 2, and the internal situations gets covered under GS paper 3 under challenges to internal security as well as security challenges and their management in border areas. So on this note, this article highlights about the global disorders taking place with respect to emerging Cold War between US, Russia as well as China. And this conflict can be seen with respect to Ukraine as well as trade wars. Further, this article says that China's Belt and Road Initiative has now been endorsed by Vietnam and Japan, and this endorsement by both Vietnam and Japan will now isolate India and Asia as an opponent of BRI, that is Belt and Road Initiative. Now, on this note, the Indian government needs to think over its isolation with respect to Belt and Road Initiative. Further, the US-China trade war has also led to major upheavals in global economic trade, and this has also impacted India. So, a global trade war has also its impact on Indian economy. Following Brexit, there has been certain decline in Britain's financial asset, and the impact of Brexit on India is yet to be seen. So, on this note, the Indian government should take possible steps to foresee the impact of Brexit on India. Further, the article mentions that the strengthening relationship between Japan and China is yet to unfold on India. So, as of now, India does not know what will be the impact of a growing relationship between Japan and China. Now, with respect to India and China, not much has changed except the fact that there has not been any major Chinese incursion, and this can be taken as a positive note with respect to India-China's relationship. Now, another development which India needs to foresee is with respect to China, where it has initiated to create a China-Myanmar economic corridor on the lines of CPEC, that is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Further, China is also seeking control over Kyabkyu port on the Arakan coast in Myanmar, as you can see in this particular picture. And all these developments in the surrounding regions of India will make India worried, specifically with respect to growing clout of China in the surrounding regions. Further, China is also planning Kra Canal in Thailand to connect Andaman Sea with the Gulf of Thailand, as you can see in this particular picture. On this point, this Kra Canal becomes important from your prelims perspective. So, point to be noted with respect to Kra Canal is that Kra Canal is in Thailand and it connects Andaman Sea with Gulf of Thailand. And also about Kyabkyu port, which is on the Arakan coast in Myanmar. So both these points becomes important from your prelims perspective. Now, as already mentioned, China's growing control over the Indian Ocean region, along with its existing control over the Gwadar port in Pakistan and Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, and expected port in Thailand and Myanmar, would provide China a stranglehold across Indian Ocean region. So this development is again a worrying factor for Indian government. Further, India is also sidelined after US withdrawal from Afghanistan-led talks. And also, India's continued opposition to Afghan Taliban has resulted in India being sidelined. So these are some of the developments taking place on the external front as highlighted in this article. Moving ahead on the internal situations. It says there are certain issues with respect to internal situations as well. First of all, marginal increase in left extremist violence. However, this movement has remained confined within a core area in Chhattisgarh, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, and Jharkhand. So, ideologically speaking, this movement has remained vibrant or alive. So, in 2019, both ideological and militant aspects of this movement needs to be handled by the Indian government. Next, the article highlights about the deteriorating situation in Kashmir, especially in 2018, and says that the year 2018 witnessed some of the highest levels of violence since 1989, where more educated locals joined militancy. So the government needs to seriously think on its policy with respect to Jammu and Kashmir. And thirdly, the author has highlighted about a resurgence of ethnic subnationalism in the northeast part of India. And this has resulted because of the enactment of Citizenship Amendment Bill, as the bill has given rise to fears among local residents of permanent demographic transition in the region. So, as per the article, because of this bill, there has been a certain resurgence in ethnic subnationalism in the northeast part of India. So, these are some of the internal situations which the government of India needs to handle in the upcoming years. Now, these questions have been asked in mains examination in 2018 and two questions in 2017. Now, in 2018, a question was asked with respect to US Iran nuclear pact controversy and its impact on India. In 2017, the question was on India's energy policy cooperation with West Asian countries as well as on China. The question read, China is using its economic relations and positive trade surplus as tools to develop potential military power status in Asia. In light of this statement, discuss its impact on India as her neighbor. So we understand that important international event becomes important with respect to our UPSC examination. So please go through this article from a mains perspective. And from your prelims point of view, please remember about Kyapu Port and Kra Canal. Now after the discussions, this forms your practice questions for the day. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. First, consider the following statements about Model Code of Conduct in India. First, Model Code of Conduct is in itself legally binding code. No, remember we said that Model Code of Conduct in itself is not legally binding. However, it becomes binding through other provisions like Indian Penal Code, CRPC, and provisions of Representation of People Act 1951. And it is on this note that a parliamentary committee has suggested that Model Code of Conduct becomes legally binding and becomes a part of Representation of People Act 1951. So on this note, first statement is incorrect. Second, the Model Code of Conduct is enforced from the date of announcement of election schedule by the Election Commission. Yes, the statement is correct. Third, Model Code of Conduct does not apply during bypolls. No, it also applied during bypolls. So in this, only 2 is the correct statement. So here, B is a correct answer. Moving to the next question. It said, consider the following statements about biopolymer. Cellulose is the most common biopolymer on earth. Yes, this is correct. Second, biopolymers are carbon neutral in nature. Yes, we have also discussed this. In this, C becomes our correct answer. Moving to the third question. It says, which of the following are the responsibilities of Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade? First, promotion of internal trade, yes. Welfare of traders, yes. E-commerce, yes. Monitoring of prices and availability of essential commodities. No, this option is incorrect. So in this, C is the correct answer, that is 1, 2 and 3 only. Fourth, consider the following statements on Kra Canal. First, it will connect Gulf of Thailand with Arabian Sea. No, it will connect Gulf of Thailand with Andaman Sea. So this statement is incorrect. Second, it will improve transportation in the region. Yes, this is true. So in this, B is the correct answer. So these were some of the practice questions discussed today from our news analysis. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.